you about that. So my great I work for the Freedom Socialist Party here in the Bay Area. I'm a union plumber, I'm a queer parent. And it's interesting, Sarah and I were just talking, plumbing and astrophysics aren't always seen and, used in the same conversation, but it is interesting. I'm very excited to be chairing this panel because I'm also in a profession that is traditionally, not heavily populated by women and non-cis men. So, that would be, I'm very excited for a number of reasons, to hear what you have to say. If you're new to the Freedom Socialist Party, we're a socialist, feminist, working class party. Since the abuses of capitalism on the poor and working classes are international, we are internationalists. We fight in our unions for better working conditions, but also for instance, an end to the genocide in Gaza and other matters of really decisive importance to the 99% around the world. Our aim is total emancipation for women and people of color and queer folks, immigrants, the disabled, and everybody who is exploited and oppressed because of the profit system and its ever expanding lust for profits. So that's who we are, but now we can jump right in and get to our panel of speakers. Today's event is a discussion of the long struggle for women to integrate into all the various science fields. And it's also a look at the importance of advocating for a feminist approach to science, from the way science is funded to the lack of focus on, say, women's health in medical studies. Feminism is really sorely needed. So Sarah and Stephania have a lot to share about all of this, and we'll get into introducing them now. Again, on the left here in person, Sara Petty is an astrophysicist. I'll just say that again, you get a chance to hear from an astrophysicist. I know the last time we had the opportunity to do that. And she's a mentor for marginalized students. She's worked to bring more women and LGBTQ folks into places where she's worked. Her focus is on uncovering the mysteries of how galaxies form, but she's also passionate about learning from physics and astronomy to building social justice movements. It's a pretty great combination. So welcome, Sarah. Woo! And then again, joining us by phone is Stephania Widger, who is a recently retired biologist who worked on isolating and investigating insect proteins. Also, probably not something you have the chance to hear about every day. So this is pretty cool. Working class smarts are going to be well on display today. When Stephanie was working, she fought for equal benefits for queer lab workers. She also happens to be an opera singer, and so don't put her in a box. And she brings her methodical, thoughtful brain also into organizing ongoing protests in Hayward, California, just across the bay, in defense of Palestine, in support of immigrants, and promoting other working class topics. So this panel is not to be put in any small boxes, that's for sure. So we'll get started. Given that Stephania has some technological issues, we'll try to keep a little bit of structure, and I'll maybe just alternate who answers first. But if there's any issue with being called on, Sarah and Stephania, if you'd rather the other one go first, you can always put that up. So let's put it. The first thing I want to talk about is just obviously there must be challenges to getting into your fields, challenges in remaining in your field. Kind of curious what led you to pursue work in your specific areas, and what have been those challenges? Where have you found support? So welcome on in, and for that we'll just take a moment. We got some more folks coming into our hall in person, so we'll get a little bit settled. Welcome. So again, to repeat the question, there must be challenges both to enter into your specific field and to remain and to survive in them. So curious, what led you each to pursue your scientific areas, and what have been the challenges, and also where has the support come from? So why don't we start with Sarah, if you'd like to answer that.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted, and we'll let Sarah go first, and then we'll let you know for sure when you're next up.
Oh, okay, thank you. It's a little wobbly here, so we'll just take it as we go.
Okay, thanks
Okay, well, first of all, I'm sorry I'm not there in person, and I look forward to seeing the recorded version of this. I actually had two majors in college, classical voice and field biology. At the time I was in school, there was no biotech per se. That was soon to be coming, but it wasn't there yet. And there also were very few jobs in field biology outside of park rangers. I remember going to a lecture in Berkeley by Jacques Cousteau, and he was one of my heroes until that lecture. Afterwards, when he was giving the lecture, he did mention he didn't allow women on his ships. He said that we were bad luck. And yeah, that really surprised me. It was very old-fashioned attitude. Anyway, my mom was a great influence on me. She worked at Sandia Nuclear Lab in Livermore and used to take us to Family Day every year, and you'd see these awesome computers that were the size of buildings. It was just amazing. I worked in a few different labs as I came up through into biotech. I worked at Leslie Salt Company. I was their very first female employee, and the guys that worked the shift that I worked used to have to make a sign that had women on it, so they put it on the bathroom door every time I was in there. That was kind of fun. And they were actually very, very nice guys. Then from there, I went on to bioresponse, which was where I first started learning about biotech. And at that point, the PCR had not yet been invented. When I moved to my next company, that was Chiron, and that is where the PCR was actually invented. And we were using it, and I would use the PCR for the different viruses that I was growing and the different proteins I was growing from the viruses. And this is all a lot to understand. I'm not sure I can really explain it too well, what biotech really is. But think of it as biology in miniature form. And I was learning how to use reactors, and I had these 100 and 200 liter reactors that I never thought I'd be able to use, because I never thought of myself as someone to work with machines like that. But they were amazing, and they were definitely my babies. And next time I'm able to show anything in person, I'll show you the photographs I still have of them. That I had planned on showing those today. When I think of my support, I have to say it has to have been my boss, which was a woman named Leah, and she gave me a belief in myself. And also the upper boss, Carlos Nascimento, was one of the 3 people who started Chiron. And he always came in to visit the reactors. He thought they were great. And it was such a great feeling. The people who started Chiron tended to be UCSF and UC Berkeley graduates, and they were just wonderful. And they gave the women, they were very strongly women oriented. So we had it lucky that way, that a lot of companies and women in the industry didn't have that. And I think that pretty much covers it.
Awesome. We do have a quick question, if you can answer briefly. What's a PCR?
Oh, a PCR is a machine. It's a machine about the size of a bread box. And what it does is it multiplies. You take a little tiny bit of genetic material. Oh, by the way, anyone who remembers OJ knows that their lawyers were terrified of the PCR being used in court, and they got it thrown out because of its accuracy. The PCR can take a tiny bit of DNA, tiny, literally cellular DNA, and you put it in there, you get it cranking, and it does nothing but grow it and grow it and grow it and grow it till you have enough material to be able to do whatever testing you want to do on it. And whenever I've gone to court in order to be a witness, not a witness, what are those 12 people, the jurors? They always would throw me out if they found out that I worked at Chiron or Novartis, because they didn't want anyone who believed in PCR, and you always knew it was a rape case that they were trying if they did that.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm grateful that Sarah and Stephanie have also been participating in some study groups that we've been doing. We always run out of time, so we wish this could be like a 5-hour event. So if I do happen to give you a little nudge, or Stephanie, I'll have to give you a verbal nudge. It's only because we want to make sure we do get to the next question. So I hope that we will take that in as friendly a manner that I mean it. So next up, same question for Sarah. What were some of the challenges and what are some of the supports that you've had?
Thank you, Stephanie, and that was quite a history. So mine is probably similar in that we had multiple interests. I started out as an art student and then as a fine arts, and then I decided I also loved math and astronomy, but I finally decided I did math too much and go in that direction. But I'll start from when I was very young. I had an obsession with nothingness, which is a very mathematical concept. And part of that went into obsessions with caves where you go in and they hype up, the never-ending hole that goes to the center of the earth. They would drop the rock and say, you can't hear it. It's drop, even though sometimes I could hear it.
Speaking to the mic.
Okay, so that concept to me, like I would have these nightmares about it, but I loved it. I loved that concept of what is space, what is emptiness, and even at some point I lived in a very rural part of Colorado where I could see the Milky Way, and I was still more fascinated with the space part between the stars rather than the stars themselves. So that kind of stuck with me, and I really, kind of meandered topics in terms of what I was really interested in. I read a lot, so that's part of why I, went from topic to topic. But by the time I did go to university, I really did find that, I want to go into physics. I want to focus on astrophysics, and what I could do in that, I wasn't too sure. Part of the inspiration that really nudged me in that direction was Carl Sagan. Yeah, he's an extraordinary scientist and communicator. And his book, I have read all of it, and the book that really pushed me in that direction was Pale Blue Dot, which is a beautiful book because it has a lot of scientific images and descriptions of the type of technology at the time to explore other worlds, and also just the openness to how anyone could go into this field and how it helps society. So a lot of the, kind of this feeling when you go into physics and astrophysics is, what are you doing for the world? And so obviously I'm a total geek, and I think any knowledge is useful for the world. So that's some of my philosophy in there, but I also kind of through the people who came before saw how they changed the world just by getting people interested in thinking about our world around us. So given that, I went from undergrad and took a year or two off. I actually did Teach for America, and I taught high school in Baltimore, which was quite a learning experience. I went from the Seattle area to Baltimore. And then I got an offer to do some research at NASA at Mars Space Flight Center, and to a grad school at Public University of America, which has a great program. And it was perfect for me because it was a smaller graduate cohort. And for me as a woman, I really, at least for some women can handle this, some people who are more competitive in nature, like they like that drive, would do well in a big R1 university. But me, I like to take my time. I like to think about things. I like to not feel pressure, because then I just kind of blank. So I really just happened to land in the right place for me to thrive, and spent my entire career as a grad student doing research. I started out in solar physics, which is basically studying what the sun is and the atmosphere of the sun, and some of the things that are mysterious. One part of that is the outer atmosphere, why we have solar storms that happen that affect the Earth, and why there are certain anomalies with that. So one of the things that's very weird is that the sun itself, the surface of the sun, is cooler than if you go way, way, way out. It's hotter on that outer part. And the theory behind that is the magnetic fields in the sun. They're very strong, they're very active, are transferring energy out there. And I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to go that. We still don't understand this. So I was kind of working in that area, and then that's the great thing. I'm studying the great thing. Remember, I like to start emptiness. So I just happened to run into a new faculty member and researcher who's a woman from Brazil, Brazilian woman, who is very strong, extroverted, out there, pushing feminism and science in her country. And then she came to Washington, D.C. to just do her research through Goddard, and she wanted a grad student. And they, at the Catholic University, they mentioned me because she wanted a female grad student. And I was like, this is right up my alley, because she studied galaxies. And even though they're made up of stars, bright stuff, they are dominated by star family. And things that and at the centers of them are massive black holes. And you can't get much emptier in terms of light than a black hole. So that's my trajectory until 20-some years later, I'm here and talking to this group, this wonderful group. And I've been through a lot. I have not been through a straight path. I have a lot of problems here and there, kind of left academia, did some other work in other fields, taught high school for a little bit, and then now I'm doing research again. So my story is not like, oh, I went to Harvard and then, kind of straight from A to B to Z. I went from A to Z, back to B, and all over the place. So I think in that sense, that helped me relate to pretty much anyone. And at the same time, I had my helpers who were, the women, and also finding people, not just women, but the men, those who saw the potential in me and wanted to work with me. That's the main thing. I don't want to be seen as, oh, you're a woman doing astronomy. It's like, oh, hey, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on, how do galaxies form in this epoch of our universe? Oh, yeah, I know somebody who works on that, probably should collaborate. So I wanted more of that collaborative approach for me personally. And that kind of opened my eyes to who are the helpers, kind of interrupters, then find the helpers. And that was really important to me. And I still have plenty of helpers that I really appreciate.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's the introduction to who these two speakers are. Well, thank you. So next up, and we'll start back with Sarah. We'll just keep alternating. Do you think being a woman, and I'm sure you can extrapolate, other people who are underrepresented in the sciences or in STEM, does it make you do science different? In a few minutes.
Yeah. I think this actually will be quick for me because I think everybody does things different. I don't, I think whatever you have had in your life is going to help you see the world differently. I mean, I want to think that, I'm neurodivergent. I have an invisible disability. I'm queer. So it's like there's all these things, and everybody has something where they've had their challenges or have felt different. I think it's just how much does the system support you? Wow. And so going back to science and STEM, am I in an environment where I feel like 100% of my effort can be focused on the work at hand, or am I having to squat hands off of me because people want to touch me inappropriately, or they're saying things to me that help me feel that small? So, and that, I think everybody who has been in a position where they are not represented by the top people in that field understands that. And so for me, that makes you approach things different. If you're going to survive, you're going to find the helpers, and then maybe you will have more of a collaborative approach, finding a collective to work with, getting that feedback to help, for me, it's like, am I crazy or did this happen? Am I crazy or is my scientific idea sound? And I think all scientists should be asking that. My scientific ideas. But I think that, again, I'm speaking as me, and I'm sure Stephanie will have her own experience with that, and I'm definitely interested. So, yeah.
Take it away, Stephanie.
Okay, well, Sarah gave a great, thank you, Sarah, that was awesome. What I find working in because what I'm doing is was working in the industry for close to 40 years. Wow. And in the Bay Area, we're very, very lucky to have a lot of top female scientists. And the first biotech company, the first large biotech company, BioResponse and Chiron, both they were both started by people from Berkeley and San Francisco, and though they were male scientists that started it, especially Chiron pulled on the women scientists that they knew from UCSF and Berkeley, and so that meant that those were my bosses, were these women that just blew me away. And that made a big difference on how the companies I worked with women. And I think that's different than you see in a lot of other companies, because my supervisor found me when she went to Switzerland on a conference that she was going to be the first time they ever spoke about insect cell viruses, and she was giving the talk. And it was done in Switzerland, and the Swiss scientists didn't realize my boss was in the pool swimming while they were gossiping. And they were talking about how dare they have a woman from America give the head talk. And then the next day they were very embarrassed when they saw who it was that they were talking with. And so because of that, I think I'm very lucky to have had a great influencers. And that's what it takes. It takes women at the top that can help the women coming up. And without that, if you happen to have men that are feminist men, then, that's wonderful, but that doesn't always happen. Companies like Genentech, very male-oriented. Companies like Amgen, very male-oriented. And I think it's a shame because they're missing their women's talents.
Thank you so much. And I am not surprised that there are some chuckles in this. The swimming pool story is a good one. Now, okay, bear with me. This next one, I'm hoping you can kind of go a little bit quickly, because I especially want to talk more about your own specific experiences, but I'm sure that there are burning examples for both of you as far as unrecognized contributions that women have made in sciences, scientific fields. So actually, let's do this. I want to, sometimes if you keep having to go after you just finished, it's a lot. So let's keep going. Why don't I have Sarah answer that? So what are some unrecognized contributions that women have made?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I have a lot to say here, so I will need to be quite a bit waiting to add. I'm going to try and get this inside. So I really want to highlight Emily Neuer, who she's a mathematician born in around 1880, 1882. I have my notes here. And she died in 1935. And I wanted to point out, she was Jewish and lived in Germany. So as you can know by those dates, she, had some significant challenges by the, as she was reaching the end of her life. But one of the things is she grew up in Germany, where even going to university as a female was, you're going to ruin the vibe, basically. And so she was allowed to go basically because she had some privilege, because her father was a professor. And that opened the door for her to audit the courses. And it just turned out that she was quite brilliant in math. And she started to contribute quite a bit and opening up new doors. So that can kind of go to the last thing where she probably thought differently. And I want to mention a quote. Someone at one of the universities, it was like a dean of one of the colleges, said a female student would overthrow all academic order. And there's actually truth to that.
Yeah.
We're changing the paradigm.
Yes.
So my answer would have been,
Yeah.
so I think the main contribution, and I'll kind of leave it at that, is Einstein actually worked with her, and he would not have been able to come up with general relativity without her mathematical prowess. So she basically, I'm sure all of you have heard of conservation of energy. Well, while he's doing his work in general relativity, he notices, well, energy's not quite conserved here, what's going on? And he didn't really have a mathematical reason for why conservation of energy is correct. It's a very Newtonian classical dynamics thought process. It gets us to the moon. It does great things. However, for when you start getting into modern physics, there's some questions there. What she found out is that it's based on symmetry. And so symmetry, as we know, if you have a sphere, that's totally symmetric in every dimension. So if you have something that's asymmetric in any dimension, you're going to have non-conservation in that. But if you cut things into a certain level, you can make it conserved within that area, and then you can start working on it. So he was able to take that and become known as one of the most brilliant scientists, and everything I do relies on her and herself. So I will leave it at that.
It's really incredible the trail through time of these trailblazers, and that you're able to literally be standing on those boulders. It's really exciting. Stephania, and again, I mean, I'm sorry, I will ask you to try to keep it as one of your relatively shorter answers, but do the best you can. We want to hear it all, but do the best you can. Are you there, Stephania?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, my turn. Okay. Well, the first and foremost person I have to say is an incredible woman scientist is Jane Goodall. And she was the most famous primate scientist in history. And she is definitely well known, but when she first started out, she had to start out on her own and wasn't even going to college at the time. And so she had to pave her own path, and I thought that was an incredible story. If you haven't heard the story of Jane Goodall, I would say she has a book out that's really incredible. The people that I tend to know are a lot of the nature path type people, like Rachel Carson, who, if you've read any of her books, she was one of the very first environmental scientists. We didn't even have environmental science at the time. And she was basically she was the birthplace of it. And she rose above everybody to become the central to the American politics, culture, and foreign policy. And if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have global warming at what they're doing to stop global warming right now. She was the beginning of that whole path. And I know we're short on time, so I don't want to go over my book that I wrote here.
Well, that's very generous of you. I won't take you up on that, although again, I only wish that you both could be here in person, because I'm sure that nobody's going to be leaving. You're going to be accosted by more questions, even past the discussion period. Okay, well, awesome. Continuing on, what are some examples of studies or experiments being stronger, whether you participated or just of them, because of a feminist worldview, or maybe because of the participation of people of color or queer folks or disabled folks, whatever the case may be? How is science sometimes made stronger because of that participation? And let's see, let's keep going. I'll go have Sarah start.
What question is this? Question number 4?
It is, and we'll give you a break. I'm going to have Sarah start, and then you'll go after Sarah. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
So again, trying to keep this short, and I think that everything I've said before kind of aligns with this, because when you have people from different backgrounds who are not represented by the status quo, you will have different thinking. And opening up the people who came before and to mentor others where they notice, oh, like my thesis advisor said, I want a female student. I want to carry on the legacy of women in astrophysics. I want to and teach me about her experience in Brazil, which is totally different than my experience in the US as a white woman. And she also, well, I'll skip that. I want to mention, it was funny, Stephania had mentioned putting up a, women's restroom for her to be able to get on the ship. And I have a story of Sarah Rubin, who is an astrophysicist, who was told she could not be an observer at, I think it was Palomar Observatory, because there was only a men's room. And women cannot use the facilities, so we could tell as a plumber, you must know. And so she, I just love her for this. Made a little cutout of a stick figure with a triangle dress on it and stuck it on there. It's a woman's restroom now. I can have it her. And so that to me is that feminist viewpoint of like, I'm taking up space here and I'm going to make it work. And
yeah.
Oh, that's wow. That's, you need to say no more. That's pretty good. Thank you. How about you, Stephanie?
What?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thanks for the prompt. Well, I find that definitely when you're testing a new, on my end of the science, when you're testing a new drug, you're running a clinical trial, and most of the clinical trials that I've seen started at Chiron and Novartis have been closed gender groups. They've been males, they've been white males, they've been young white males. And this can cause discrepancies in the results. When you have those kind of the results coming in, you don't get a mixed market, and therefore the issue comes up where you can have problems with the drug when it gets to market. And this is one of the reasons why they've started opening up clinical trials to women and to more gender than just the white. I mean, more than just white males, because they started having lawsuits. And unfortunately, the pharmaceutical industry only reacts to money. And I think it's really disappointing to have to say that. It's one of the things I don't like about the industry that I ended up in. It is that I saw that only bad press and potential dangerous results would cause them to make that change. And an interesting thing that happened right here in the Bay Area. I don't know if any of you have ever driven past the front gates of Bayer. The Bayer aspirin company. Mm-hmm. Well, they live in Emeryville, and Bayer had an issue where they were doing some blood work. This is during the 60s and 70s, and there was no test for HIV at that point. And so they were cleaning up these blood particles, sending them off to, what was it, Factor X? Yes, Factor X. They were sending it off to the Red Cross, who was then injecting this blood into diabetes and diabetics. And we actually almost lost the entire generation of diabetics at that point. They almost all became HIV positive. And so for years, you'd find people dressed in skeletons standing outside of Bayer's front gates once a week.
That's incredible. Thank you for that.
I don't know if anyone's heard that. They kept that pretty quiet.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephania. Just gonna let that sink in for a second, because I want to be moving so fast. Okay, well, moving into another, I mean, I know a lot of these questions are overlapping, but both of you, have, been mentors and have been fighting for, either inclusion of women and queer folks or, better, working conditions for people, on the job. So what have been, some of the efforts you've been involved with, to fight for equality on the job for yourself and also for other folks that again are underrepresented and, I guess we could stop saying underrepresented, but are also discriminated against in these fields. What are some of those fights that stand out for you? We'll continue, Stephanie, if it's okay, we'll continue to just alternate. So I'll have Sarah go first.
That's okay, fine.
So, I think for my end of things, as I mentioned, I taught high school, and many times I've run into students who were queer and they came to me and talked to me worried about college, worried about whether or not they were going to fit in, and asking for that kind of one-on-one advice. And I think also being a woman, so I'm kind of talking about the one-on-one, where I think that's really important to me. Being a woman, I've been told that I'm much more approachable. I'm not, and it's funny because I'm very honest and blunt with students. Like if their work isn't up to par, I will tell them I'm not going to, kind of mollycoddle, as they say. I will be very blunt, just like I would any other colleague. But there was this, whatever it was that I brought to the table was, like, I think this person will listen to me. And so I often feel like that's probably the best place that I've helped, space that I've taken up is willing to listen to anybody, no matter it could be white, cis, male, but they're struggling for whatever reason, and I want to be a sounding board for anyone to come to and say, this is hard. And because it doesn't matter who you are, it's difficult. But other than that, professionally, I've been a part of the American Astronomical Society, where they have a committee for the status of women in astronomy, and they, meetings where they discuss the status. What are the problems? Very, who's on the ground? We need help. We need care for children so that anybody with children can come in and participate at the meetings. And that took until probably the mid-10s, like 2015 or something, before that was actually finally established and set up. Which it just seems like that's way too late. The other is, there's also in 2012, there's a committee for, it's called Sigma, so I have to look at, I'm like, what does that stand for? Sexual orientation, gender minorities in astronomy. And I know we don't like to use the term minority, but that's what they set it up as. So they started in 2012, and just a group of us who go out to get coffee or whatever and talk about, what are the challenges. And it turned into a full-on committee where they started to insist on trans rights and being recognized, having bathrooms. Speaking of bathrooms, that anybody can use. That was right before the Me Too movement. So then a lot of stuff came out about making things accessible and fair for everyone. The one last thing I'll say is that just after I graduated from my PhD in physics, I was a delegate for the US in Women in Physics and went to Stellenbosch, South undergrad, which was more of an opportunity for me where, sharing what I was working on. It basically, you apply to be a delegate and you share a bunch of women, show up. At that time, they were opening up an astronomy department at the university there, and they were highlighting women in South Africa to be the first people to start that astronomy cohort.
Nice.
So
Oh.
it was a really great experience for me to women, and this is the other thing that I want to mention is that science itself it's borderless. It is so international, and the only thing keeping other people, other scientists from working together is because of governments keeping funding or gatekeeping access. We have things like Zoom, and we have email, we have ways to connect to know others. Things nowadays are much better.
Okay, Stephania, how about you? Some fights or, what's to build equality on the job for yourself or for others?
Well, let's see. Well, Chiron had a small group of LGBTQ. And when I first got there, I had just come out, and I joined with, I met a guy and he told me about it, and it was a wonderful thing. We met every Friday and we called it the Pink Friday group. And we decided that we had nothing to lose if we were to talk to the heads of the company about the domestic partnership. And so we marched up to Ed Penhote's office and said, Ed, we need domestic partnership. And he looked so surprised, and he said, wow, we don't have it. And he hadn't even thought about it. And the next week we had domestic partnership. And most of the people were thrilled. I met one scientist who was pissed off at it, and he later moved to New Hampshire, so that's okay. But that was wonderful to see how quick they were willing to give us that particular right. And then when the Swiss company bought us, they didn't take it away, which was great. I also started an organic garden. And the organic garden was about, 20 by 40 feet. And we were able to teach people how to grow a garden, people that had never put their fingers in dirt before. So that was really wonderful. And I felt that really made a difference in their lives. And there was another thing. The third thing would be, when the COVID crisis first hit very strongly, our company had literally just let go their entire infectious disease group, which was just a horrible timing. But so we didn't have an infectious disease group. There was a company down the street, Grifols, who did, and they had the same kind of reactors I had, but they didn't have any bags for the reactors. So I asked the company if I could loan them some bags. And normally the biotech and especially big pharma, they do not work together. They keep their secrets very close to their chest. And in this case, they said, sure. So I ended up giving them about $5,000 worth of wave bags. And they never asked for the money back. So I think that was pretty great.
Wow.
And it was what I always wanted. I always wanted the companies to work together, not apart.
It should be borderless. It works best when it's borderless. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is kind of building on everything you've been talking about. What do you think are the connections between science and just fighting for the better world that, we all need, whether that's against racism, against, occupation, against, all these things? What are the connections, whether that's the science itself or the scientific mind or whatever it might be? What are those connections? Let's give Sarah a break from going first. And Stephania, if you can hear us okay, we'll have you go first on what are the connections between science and fighting for a better world.
So who's going first?
So that would be you if you were amenable to that.
Oh, okay. Well, I definitely see the connection. Contrary to RFK Jr.'s ideas, the world, could you imagine a world with how unsafe the world would be if we did not have vaccines? We have vaccines right now for tuberculosis, for shingles, smallpox, flu, let alone COVID-19 and hepatitis B. Where would we be without those? We're working so hard to continue working on HIV. We don't have a vaccine against it yet. We have some therapeutics, but that's the best we've been able to do so far. But if people like RFK Jr. took over, where the hell would we be? So I'm very, very happy that I did science as a career, because I believe that it has offered a lot to the world.
That's such a relevant. Thank you. How about you, Sarah?
Yep, I will try to keep this brief again.
Just do what you
Yeah,
got.
so I think that it's apparent just in the times we're living in the US that science is threatening to certain people, right? We see that there's a push against schools trying to teach accurate science. I think that is well established. Stephania brought up, not having vaccines, which that's inhumane, I believe. So I think that's part of what science brings. It can seem cold and calculated, but I think it is a big part of humanity and understanding that we are all the same, we're all on the same boat together, one planet, and we don't have another one, despite what Elon Musk thinks of Mars. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. So I think that science itself, in my opinion, I'm very biased, is the answer, mainly because it helps us correct ourselves. Because that's the goal of it. As long as we aren't applying the dominant viewpoint that capitalism tends to, and patriarchy tends to shove it to our faces. So it's like you have to step back. That's why international collaborations are really good. That's why studying things outside of our own view is important in my opinion.
Okay, well, I know, we have a couple more questions, and then I know, I'm sure there's gonna be a long line of folks lining up to, ask you their own questions. The last couple are specific, one for Stephania and one for Sarah. So let me see which one first. Let's start with Sarah. And it's very much about astrophysics and about what you do. What are the contributions by women and non-cis men in astrophysics? Figuring that most of us, I think, if we took a poll, are not astrophysicists, and we really don't even always, know how you approach your work. So already what you told us is like such a special, and a rare glimpse into how it all works. But since we don't know all that, are there times that your perspective as a woman, as a feminist, have actually steered you and informed, when you're exploring the galaxies, when you're doing your thing? So that can kind of take you in a lot of places, but please feel free to take your time and let us know your response to that.
Yeah, so I tend to be a contrarian in my thinking, which can get me into trouble, but it also helps me as a scientist. What it also does is I don't like to feel pressured, like I mentioned. In fact, I will about face and go do my own thing. My family can attest to me being very stubborn. So I think that has driven me, and whether or not that's, you know, I think that is how I am as a feminist. And it's like, if I have an idea, I don't want to be proven wrong, but I will go for it. At the same time, I see a lot of people walking over towards a topic. So I mentioned that I study galaxy evolution. The big topic that everybody loves is the active galaxies. And what this means is they are forming a lot of stars. They have supermassive black holes that have jets coming out of them. There's a lot of noise and information coming from them, and they're rich with information, and I have collaborated in studies on them. But what I really am interested in are the galaxies that are considered dead, dread and dead. So the stars in them are already on their late, elderly stage, and there's a lot we don't know about them. And because not as many people are willing to look at it, I feel like I can kind of go in there and think about it in my own way and go back to my colleagues, ask them questions, what do you think of this? And for me, that's a comfortable space to be in, because I don't feel like I'm going to have like 50 different people trying to assert whatever I'm doing, which has happened in the past, or trying to tell me how wrong my ideas are, or think that I'm an undergrad when I'm actually a postdoc. Right? I've had that assumption be made on me, and so I get taught or mansplained, in the terms, about my own field. So I find that that's kind of where you find the helpers, or the people are like, oh, you're interested in this. So that I think there's a little bit of a draw in that sense. And also I am absolutely fascinated with these galaxies because we don't know. And I like enigmatic puzzles of like, why are we seeing certain features that shouldn't be there? And I really want to answer this question. So I think that's I think that pretty much answers.
Hey, wow. Awesome. So Stephania, you broached this earlier in a previous question, but we are really, I feel like we're barely starting to acknowledge in society that women are ignored, like in medicine and healthcare, which is your emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, something actually that I was noticing that I did say a lot of this already about male and female, but there is a cancer connection that I hadn't mentioned. Cancers often have various genetic compositions, and many of them can vary depending on which gender you're looking at. And so when you're getting cancer treatments, what you're looking at these days, as opposed to what you were looking at before, there wasn't any way of varying anything other than a male cancer connection. I'm not sure if that actually says it right. But now that you have gender roles where males and females are both in the clinical trials, you can look at the difference in the genetic makeup of various cancers, and that will give you another way of being able to connect to that cancer and end the cancer. Women now, their breast cancer was almost not looked at because it wasn't something that men supposedly got. But now that they're finding men with breast cancer, they're starting to look at it more, and they're starting to look at both male and female versions. And the different versions are very important as far as treatment.
Thank you so much. And I did give you both a sense of what we were going to be talking about. I'm going to put you on the spot just to wrap up, Stephania, because I have a follow-up related question. Are there any examples? Obviously, you know, race is a construct, it's not a scientific concept, but are there similar instances where, you know, because you mentioned, you know, it's mostly young white male, are there studies where, or are there examples that you can think of where race has really been a huge obstacle to people, you know, the racism in the studies of just using white men. Does that bring up any specific either diseases or specific drugs where that had to be righted, or where that's still something where people of color are being really affected by the racism in these studies?
You're talking about the racism as far as what drugs are administered?
Yeah, just if the exclusion of people of color from the studies, or that kind of thing.
I see.
Just you can give us any example, since you also had really important ones in terms of women. It's capitalism, so it would kind of seem to follow that that's probably true for other oppressed folks. Just curious.
Yeah. Well, what it does is it keeps information away from the study that is needed. If you don't have all of the information, all of the players in the field, I mean, it's like a football game that all you have is halfbacks out there. And I don't know the damnedest about football, but I know that the different backs mean different things.
Yeah.
Okay. So it does make a difference. It makes a difference when, well, have you ever heard about another little tidbit here? Have you heard about Henrietta Lacks?
Yep.
Have? But well, Henrietta Lacks is a Black woman who died of cancer. And when they did not have at this point any kind of immortal cell lines to be able to be studied and tested, and they noticed that the cell lines that they had put in the incubator of hers didn't die. The tumors were not dying; they were continuing to grow, and this became the first cell line that was able to be used for studies, and it was from a Black woman, and they did not tell her family. It was kept very quiet for many years until only recently. And so there's a book called The Immortal Cells of Henrietta Lacks, and the cells are called the HeLa cells. And without that, where would we be with cancer? We wouldn't have any cells to be studying, and because those are the only ones they've been able to get to grow internal immortally.
Hey, thank you. So that's the end of the questions and answers. So you're a little bit off the spot, but you'll be put right back on by the audience members. So first, just thank you, Stephanie and Sarah, for those. While you're brewing and percolating your questions on Zoom and here in person, I would like to ask Melody to come up for a special announcement, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Now knowing and really listening to this wonderful discussion, the questions and answers, and then part of what we do here in the Student Justice Party is to not only hold such programs, but we're out on the streets and we're maintaining, this hall, New Valencia Hall. And, so I'm here to ask if you would kindly open up your pocketbooks and make a donation to the Freedom Socialist Party so we can continue our work. We'll also invite you to work with us, and we'll work with you and the importance of building our knowledge and our analysis of what's going on in this messed up political world right now. So and the fights for social justice. So we hope that people will do that, and we don't get grants, of course, because we don't ask for them either, but we know that they would not look at us. And so this is really important, and will be helpful to us. I'm going to pass out this around with donation forms. You can fill it out, or you can put in your pack, few bucks in the basket. Thank you, and we'll tell you how much we've raised. Bye-bye.
And if you are on Zoom, I think there's a link in the chat, so if you're able to make a donation, you can hit that. Thank you. Hey, oh, already got hands, I didn't even call them normally yet, and there's multiple hands, so I'm just giving you a visual, Stephanie, of there's a frenzy of hands being raised. So yes, we will go ahead and get that started. What we normally, you're probably the best person to get the hands up if I don't see that there's hands on the Zoom. I would appreciate that. And we'll start over here and then over there. So
Oh, I sort of I was actually a very good artist, and I was doing more on science previously. So I went to was a known say a fair little brand. So here you go. Question for Sarah: how did you move from art to science? Why did you move from art to science?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question because I know on Zoom I could never really hear people. And the question was, how did I move from art to science? And honestly, you know, I really just, I was actually in the middle of a huge painting. And I was like, you know what, I love doing this. And I was at the same time, like reading Carl Sagan and, you know, other books, and I was like, I really want to do something that is, I was talking to Amy, precise, part of precise. There's the finance, there's, you know, I think all of them, both science and art, actually are very similar in approach in many ways. A lot of creativity needs to be there, but I missed the math, missed kind of the precision in understanding the world in that way. I will say that I continued, I still do, you know, my own stuff at home. I also am a very visual thinker, and I've been told that in order to be a good physicist, you have to be able to rotate things in your mind. And so I think that really helped me. And,
what do you mean by rotate things in mind?
So, okay, so this goes back to the symmetry thing. Take this picture. And I can look at that picture and I can rotate it in my mind and see it from every angle. And I think artists are very good at doing that. Where it's like Picasso could look at this and then an hour later be able to make it his own version of this picture, but it could still have its mostly the same shape.
Thank you very much.
hey, next up I have Christina, and then I see on Zoom, we'll call on Stephen next. Go ahead, Christina.
All right, well, first off, I want to thank you both for your presentation.
And I'm sorry, Christina, let's do a sound check. Can people hear Christina on Zoom? Go ahead and say another couple of things.
Another couple things.
Or do we need to move, or?
It's this.
Okay.
You could take the mic off this thing.
All right, so once again, I want to thank both of you for your presentations. It is always really powerful to get to hear from voices that I don't normally get to hear from, particularly in the realm of science. And I know both of you brought this up a bit about how people that are not part of the majority group in science tend to bring out, you know, different ways of looking at things that can lead to discoveries. But, you know, another thing that does happen with science in particular is that people that are in those marginalized groups that are pointing out the ways that science might be exploiting marginalized groups. And so this was raised with the Henrietta Lacks question. And then another, you know, area that always comes to mind for me is the syphilis experiment. It's the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. And I was wondering, I was wondering if you two have, you know, some more examples that you could point to where these, you know, different backgrounds that the scientists came from help highlight issues, either issues with or better ways of doing science. So, Stephania, would you like to start with that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how to, but I'll give it a go. In my experience at the last company I was at, we were in Emeryville and I'm talking about Chiron most of the time because Novartis is very much a big pharma, but Chiron was more of a biotech. And Chiron would reach out to the community, and we had a high school and an elementary school close by, and we offered an hour a day for any of our scientists to either go to the schools or for the school students who are interested to come and work in our laboratories. Not really work, but you know, learn what a pipette was, learn what a cell looked like. And what it did was open up the world of science to people who didn't have anything but Mr. Nye, the science guy.
Hey.
And Nay?
I said, hey, like, yes, we love Bill Nye.
Oh. But I really in fact, because I used to watch him, I loved him.
Mm-hmm.
But those kind of shows opened up science in a little way to these kids, and then we took this time. And our company, Chiron, didn't dock our pay for doing it. They just said, take the time you want to do it. And I think it takes that kind of attitude to bring people into the world of science, because like you said, it can be very complicated. I don't know if it's not been easy. I've done tutoring before, and it's not been easy to try to explain even a bioreactor to a person. They all think it's a nuclear reactor. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if I went out on a left field there.
So back to what I said about the bathroom thing, and Stephanie has thank you for her own experience with that. And I also mentioned trans rights, and also I think is one of the biggest things that has come up in physics. A lot of the physics buildings didn't have women's bathrooms, or if they did, it was in the basement. So if you were on the fifth floor, your office was on the fifth floor, every time you have to go to the bathroom, you had to go upstairs, you know, take an elevator all the way down. And also, I think in terms of people of color, which is still an issue today, of having access to higher education and seeing themselves as a part of a community of scientists, it bothers me that that's still a struggle today. And I think that is being talked about more. Unfortunately, the DEI efforts have been struck from any kind of proposals that we write. I write grants with my money, and
Yeah.
we have to strike that from there. And in fact, I can talk about this. I could do a whole thing.
Yeah.
The words you cannot put in proposals now, including the word black, which means I cannot talk about black people. So it's bad. It's bad. And so that's kind of the hush hush that we have to be. Otherwise, but we have our Slack channels where we're talking about this and knowing what do we do.
Yeah.
And so I think that goes back to we're kind of thrown back to the 1950s or whatever, where we try to be the helpers and try to think, hey, I know it's not right now. I know you're not seeing your person that we like to see representing you, but I'm here to help connect some way people.
Yeah, it makes sense there. I can recall when I used to look at our group whenever we'd have company meetings, and when it was Novartis, I would see 4 blacks in all of Novartis in Emeryville with over 1,000 people. I would see quite a number of the Asian population was well represented, but it was like Asian and whites, and that's it. And that used to really disturb me that there were only 4 black people, 4 black guys, not even a woman.
Wow.
In that representation of scientists. And you're losing brain power. And we're losing even more now, but that's for a different reason. Well, maybe not a different reason.
Continuing with great discussion, we've got Stephen on Zoom, and then here in person will be Norma after that.
Christine, then me.
Hi.
It's Steve. Go ahead,
Hello.
Stephen.
Hello. Yes. Boy,
Yeah.
it's so exciting to hear you, both of you, to speak, and it's happening at. Well, I'm in New York City, and I'm with the Freedom Socialist Party, and we in the party consider ourselves revolutionaries, socialist scientists. And one of the first time I came around the party, it was so inspiring in terms of my first education. Was Clara, who was a founder of the party and came from a different generation. She all taught us that society is also ruled by laws, that it's not just in the area of biology. So this is so exciting to hear what you have to say and all your experience. I too went to Berkeley, but before I say that, I want to say that to Stephanie is that I was roundly kind of made fun of as a freshman at Berkeley when you have to take those science classes. And I was so excited and talked to everybody about how I loved the class I was taking on introduction on entomology. The insects. It was just, it was very interesting. The frats my frat type acquaintances, they thought I was a little off for it. So I wanted to say that. The other thing is I ended up working in this life sciences building as a student worker with work study, which was all part of Johnson and everything. I graduated in 1970, and I ended up in the anatomy department. And there I had the job of cleaning cages along with a black worker, which was very important in terms of my understanding. And he was always so important of my student activism. But there I met Marion Diamond, and I've learned more about her because she's a big anatomy guru kind of, but as a result of her pioneering as a woman, I also heard other young brain scientists talk about how she was such a big important influence, and that now that area of brain science is really dominated or almost dominated by women as a result of women. So the two of you are also standing as pioneers. And the other thing, it's just so exciting to have you speak at Valencia Hall, and I was thinking about, well, we always do Black History Month, and every month is Black History Month. And when you talk about the Black woman's, you know, the cells that you referred to was all very interesting. I also want to say,
Oh, yeah.
I've learned so much from what you've said, and I do look forward to meeting you as soon as possible. Take care.
I'm so sorry for the Comcast being gone. That's a bummer today.
Well, that said, you can rest assured, I know you get no visual feedback, Stephania, but this is a rap audience and people are gonna do whatever it takes for us to hear what you're saying. So it's unfortunate, but trust me, there's no great loss there. So thank you, Steve, for comments. I'll take a couple more, and if there's questions, I'll give our speakers time to mull things over. So if there's anything you did want to respond to that people are saying, I'll take a few and then I'll see if you want to respond to anything. So next up, it looks like we would have Christine then, and then Norma. So go ahead, Christine.
Christine?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm in Monterey, California. I'm a member of the Freedom Socialist Party and Radical Women, and one of the comrades of color, where we focus on people of color issues in our work. I thank you so much for your presentation. It's been really inspiring. I've always liked bioscience and just the depth and, you know, the intricacy of life and all the different variables that exist. I almost call it a miracle, but it's so fascinating to learn about science and the stars and what's right here on Earth. My biggest concern as an environmentalist is that I don't see prevention. And I think that's a key to solving a lot of the problems that we have health-wise, is, you know, looking at the root causes of diseases or degradation of the environment. So I'm wondering how much of science, particularly in the biosciences, is oriented towards preventing disease and or cleaning up the environment.
That's a very good question. And what the question you're asking is one that has barely been touched. Because a lot of the issues with disease and is when you have an environment that is breaking down because of either something that's being dumped in the environment or something or the heat or the what's going on a daily basis, it's causing particulate matter to break apart. And often I'm not saying this very well, but disease can be created by man. And when you're destroying your environment, you can be creating disease. If you go back in history, of course we have diseases, but you'll find that some of the diseases we have now are brand new. And why are they there? Because we've done something to change the environment to create that. Even something as simple as salt and the harvesting of salt. When I worked at Leslie Salt, I learned that there were a lot of heavy metals in the salt production. And when you get people that are surrounded by taking heavy metals into their body every day when they put salt on their food, that's going to cause a problem. That's going to cause disease. And no, we're not working on it. There may be a few scientists here and there, but they're certainly not in clinical trials or anything of that sort. So sorry to give you that news. I don't think it's the best news.
So thank you for the update and your answer.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I think that's more your wheelhouse, but I do want to bring up that just as a scientist relying on funding, where did funding come from? But it's the government, and we know what's funding the government right now in terms of who has the ear. And so that's the biggest problem, is how that money is delegated. Scientists, there are ecologists. My brother actually has a PhD in ecology, and trying to work on science that's actually trying to solve the problem rather than catching up. You're always catching up in that field, and it's kind of working in an ER. You're slapping band-aids and stitches, and saying a follow-up afterwards. So I think that that's all I have to say.
Wow. Super helpful. I have a few more on the docket here on the list. So I have Norma, and then Lou, and then Bob, and we'll still have a couple more minutes after that. So if you do want to get a question or a comment in, I think I see another hand. Think about getting your hands up pretty soon, but go ahead, Norma.
Hey everyone on Zoom. And thank you so much, Stephania and Sarah, for your oration, your talking. I'm with the Freedom Socialist Party and Radical Women, and also the Bay Area Comrades of Color Caucus. And our comrade in New York kind of said what I was going to get to is the fusion of, well, as a scientific socialist, we fuse the notion of feminism with socialism, and would love to know your thoughts on socialism as scientists in this field, and how feminism has really impacted you, and the work that you've both done with Stephania, your mom's, showing you, the importance of the work that she was doing. And then I resonated very much with you, Sarah, because I myself am an auto mechanic in the city of San Francisco, and I don't think that's going to be the end of my, I love science. I've always loved the nothingness of something, right? And just, I love the stars and astrophysicists and maybe a little astronomy, right? No, kidding. But mostly I think just that there's been Hollywood tends to, bring up, I love Hidden Figures. It's a movie on 3 Black women, American, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, mathematicians who were in NASA. And you brought up the bathroom issue. And that was one of the things in the scene where it's this issue where I just wanted to use the bathroom, but I have to walk a distance to get to the space just to get there. But I think being on the shoulders of Black women, people of color, white women, etc., to get to a place where we want to create a society that's going to benefit all of us, especially poor working class folk like ourselves. And I just wanted to know what you all thought of, what is needed to grow this field. And you brought up, just the current administration, but it's been the twin parties of capitalism that have been always doing this. Really segregating us and not really giving us the benefits of everyone's, curiosity into the field of science and STEM. I mean, I loved how you were both bringing in arts and just the amount of people that have contributed to science via the art field. So would love to hear more about your thoughts on the world we want to create. So that's my question.
And let's do this. We'll call on a couple more people and let Stephanie and Sarah answer whatever's on the table at that point. Because I want to make sure I get to the next few. So Lou, you will be up next. Wanted to go back to
Okay, ask again. Oops, sorry.
Like me, it seems obvious that prevention is not possible, and having a disease that you can manage.
I'm not.
To the other scientists, how the.
It's fine.
Like what you would study, what you would focus on, if the money will be impacted more. If that didn't work.
Good question. Okay, and then let's take at least one more, and that's you, Bob.
I'll stand over here. Yeah, thanks for both Sarah and Stephanie for your talks. I'm a fellow scientist, although a male one, but a beautiful one. And yeah, I mean, there's so much out of this talk, both in terms of the science itself and the politics around science that really appealed to me. When I started graduate school in Berkeley, in the chemistry program in 1981, in a faculty of about 50, there was one woman and one black man, and that's it. Everyone else was a white male, and maybe they were all straight. At least they put on that pretension that they were all straight, and probably that's not true statistically. But yeah, so as someone who came out while in grad school, it felt like a very unsafe place. So I really appreciate what Sarah was saying about the LGBTQ folks, and Stephanie also. I mean, the work that you've done with other astrophysicists to change that, and then Stephanie also in the workplace where you were. Yeah, I mean, so much like other people said, science under socialism could really be so much different. You know, under capitalism, science has been used to enforce the sex roles and keep us divided and make it seem like women can't do science, queer people can't do science. In fact, it was scientists who said, you know, and sometimes it's good it hurt science. I mean, they push science in a certain direction that suits them, and we're really in danger of seeing that right now. It was scientists around 1970 who said that homosexuality was a mental illness. I mean, that came out of science. So it can be really perverted when the economic and political system that it's under, you know, warps it and pushes it in a certain way. You know, the movements here in this country did so much to push against that and against the idea that women could do science. I ended up teaching for years at City College of San Francisco. And one of the things, you know, we had a program called mezzo, Math, Engineering, Science Achievement, that was to get people from underrepresented groups into the sciences. And I'm sure now that that's probably been defunded. I retired 4 years ago, so I don't know if the MESA program is still there, but I was one of the people that actually got the MESA program going. Let's see. Just some other things I'll add before coming around again to the topic of socialism and what science could be like under socialism. People have mentioned Rachel Carson. There's a really good, I think it's in, you know, one of those PBS documentaries, the one on Friday, it's American Masters. That's a really good one on Rachel Carson, who they imply was queer too. So, but anyway, so just bringing it back to the idea of social, when we don't do science for profit and we don't do science to support a system like capitalism, it really opens it up, just like it opens up the arts. So again, look at the connection that you made between the arts and science. I mean, every area of creative thinking will be so much freer when we get rid of a system that only is making decisions based on how much money it makes for the very rich. So we really want to see science save the world, which it can. We need to get rid of this system, because if we don't, they'll limit science and they'll pervert it so that it actually, the science is used and the technology is used to destroy rather than to make things better for everyone.
Thank you, Bob. Melissa, did you have a here? Okay, so why don't we take one more, and then Stephania and Sarah be ready to respond to those aspects that have been raised that you would like to. So Mike, go ahead.
Mine will be very concrete. Hello, thank you very much. Like many others, I love science. greatly. I recall that Stephania, hey Stephania, this is what says here in Valencia, San Francisco. I love Stephanie, how you mentioned your mother and how she inspired you and the work that she did. My question is to both of you, including Sarah. I know my parents, in my case, have inspired me in different ways. And I would love to hear more from both of you to say who in your life as you grew or growing up really inspired you to do what you do today. And the last concrete question is to Sarah in particular. You mentioned, Sarah, if I understood you correctly, that when you were in South Africa, that you were there to, among other things, inspire or to be part of the development or the initiation of a college that focused on astronomy or astrophysics. Forgive me, I don't remember that specific field of astronomy that you mentioned, but right. So my question is, how many Black South African women were part of that in addition to other women?
Okay. All right, so I want to help our speakers out. We've got several provocative topics. So there was a question on the floor as far as well, several people make connections. The profit in not doing prevention, which points to the question of a different, economic system, socialism and science. And then Moises's question is more specific in terms of who inspired you. So I'll call on Stephania first, and again, respond as you're able to those aspects that are resonating, and then I'll call on Sarah to answer those. So Stephania?
Okay. Yeah, as far as socialism and science goes, I think we need more of it. Because right now what's going on is, and what's been going on for a long time, is that the rich are the ones that tell you where the money's going, what tests and what studies the money is going into. It's one of the reasons why there's a lot of women's medicines and women's issues are not being worked on, and they're losing money. That is a place where socialism is really important. And so I think we have a lot of work to do in that area. As far as someone else who helped me along the way, I'd say it's my English teacher in high school, Rick Yamate. He was the first person to get me a guitar. He gave me a guitar one year, and he always would let me come to his class at 5 and 6 in the morning. And I'd sit there and we'd have wonderful talks about science and what's going on in the field of science and in the world, and how the world needed more science in other parts of the world and medicines. And he was a great influencer. I'd say between him and my mom, those are the two biggest.
But I'll answer the influences. So the people who I think lifted me up and helped me feel more free to be me. Oddly enough, my older brother, who he didn't like me around because I was an annoying little sister. He was my hero. There was nothing he could do that I wouldn't love. And he loved science and he loved to learn things, and we both loved heavy metal and
Yes.
a lot in common. And to this day, we're really good friends. And I always say, my mom and my dad who's passed, we're very lucky to have two scientists as children, because we can be very good advocates for them as they age. And anyway, so my brother, I think I would say he was always in my mind like who I could be or that kind of solid person. And my dad, he was an electrical engineer, and I would get bored with the math that I would do, and he would give me more difficult problems. And he would be playing around with various computers in his basement office, and I'd be sitting next to him, and he'd be like, "Here, try and solve this," and didn't think anything of it at the time, but you know, it obviously opened doorways for me. And in terms of socialism, and I think this ties into what you were saying, asking Lou, we're not very smart sometimes as a society in terms of knowing what is best for us. I mean, I think the pandemic was a catastrophic example of how we just really shoot ourselves in the foot. And we're struggling with that now with everything happening in our country and around the world, where we can't just let the people who really know what they're talking about sit in a committee and talk things out, and also listen to the voices who are mostly impacted by things. It's everybody has to have an idea has the same weight. And it's like, I would never in my mind try to fix my toilet and think I'm better than Amy. I'll leave the gaps for each other. That I think socialism is very good about, like identifying workers as the people with the strength to society in the direction that it needs to go, and understanding that if we aren't all doing well, then we're not going to do well. There, you know, it's the weakest link kind of idea there. So when we have a very hierarchical, everything is concentrated into a 1%, even 2%, you know, money flow, which means that's where the influence comes from. The status quo is what they want to keep. I mean, we've talked about this in the study groups, that this is how capitalism always ends up, because the people in power don't want to lose that power. So why would they try to solve a problem when they could keep getting the money and extracting as much as possible? And this is counter to what scientists want to do. I mean, they're scientists who could care less about what is happening in ecology, but they're very good at what they do in, say, nuclear physics. That's fine. And at the same time, they wouldn't point to, hopefully, I mean, there are scientists that do this, but for the most part, they wouldn't say, well, I'm an ecologist and I know, you know, because I'm a scientist, I'm also an ecologist, and that's kind of what I was alluding to. Everybody thinking that their voice should be weighted the same when it comes to expertise. So I think that hopefully I kind of went around with that, but I think that's
okay, great. We do need to wrap up. I see one more hand I'll call on, and then I'll call on both speakers to take some brief closing remarks. So Susan, you are up.
All right. Hi, folks. I'm Susan. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am an applied mathematician by training with experience in oncology research and public health. So this has been a great discussion, and just it's been fun. I think a lot of things that have been said resonate with me. Just I think to kind of build on the socialism. Oh, I should also say I'm a member of the FSP sister organization, Radical Women, as well. One of the things when I heard Bob talking too, I wanted to introduce the term that I learned in a few years ago, which is like mathematical or scientific chauvinism, where sometimes people in roles of science and math have done similar to male chauvinism, right? Like, I am the expert and I know better than you. And so I think when we talk about like the expertise thing, it's like balancing that out. And I think part of socialism and feminism bringing that into science helps combat that within science, which makes science more accessible to people and could help bridge some of that conflict that we see where people don't trust experts because they've been hurt by them, because of the chauvinism displayed in those roles. I also, two other things, I think having socialism to help with science education and increase science participation could also help reduce some of those barriers in communication, so that again, people, to help restore trust in good science. And I guess to the chauvinism point, that's why DEI funding was so important. I've had friends who also lost funding because of that. That's been really tough. And to Stephania's point about medicines, the other thing is that we also do a lot of great research that doesn't benefit people, because to bring products to market has to happen through companies, the way our current system is set up. And so there are things that we have already paid for that could be beneficial to people that aren't able to be brought to market because they don't profit from companies. And I think being able to benefit more directly from those discoveries would be a really great benefit as well. So thanks for thanks for this great discussion. I love all the points that have been brought up, and yeah, wanted to add those comments.
Great.
Excellent.
That's a pretty good audience comment to end on. And as I said, I want to give just a couple minutes to each speaker. If there's something, you know, else that you want to respond to, or anything else that you want to say to kind of bring your really, really excellent presentations to a close. So let me start with Sarah and Stephania. Sarah.
Thank you so much for that. I'm sorry I already forgot your name because I'm terrible with names. Susan, yes, thank you. So I think that's absolutely correct. And I thank you for adding in that the voices that we hear from the expertise. I think this goes back to socialism, where the people who are the ones to bear the most in terms of you know, chauvinism, prejudice, racism, are the ones who should be leading the discussion. And so I think that's what was missing in my answer. But I think, you know, it's like, yeah, we want the experts, but we want the experts who really understand what's going on, because they came from the communities and have experiences that where they have had stakes in what's happening. So I really appreciate that comment, Susan. And then I really encourage people to, it seems like you're all pretty interested in science, and, you know, definitely take a look at some of these women that we talked about. If you haven't learned about them, or, you know, go watch a Carl Sagan, you know, back in the day, in Cost of the Cosmos videos. But the way he did it was just, I don't know. Like it's old school, you know, before CGI, and so kind of point. Anyway, thank you so much for everyone with your questions. And
then Stephania, you are up with your closing remarks.
Well, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. I think it could easily go on for a lot longer time, because it's a fascinating, maybe it's just me, but this fascinates me. But the remark about the scientific, what was that? The chauvinism, scientific chauvinism. I've never heard that, but boy, it really does say it all. So thank you for that. And hopefully one of these days we're not going to have too much of that. Or right now, with the last company I was in, there was a number of designer drugs being made that the only way you could even get the drugs is if you were quite wealthy. So that's one of the things I want to see work. I don't know how we can do it. We need to we need socialism. That's the only answer, I guess. Because when you see the money that goes into some of these designer drugs so that people can have, can solve their own types of baby, they can design their own babies. To me, that's disgusting. And it's disgusting that the kind of money that goes into that. And when it can go into, vaccinations. So I don't know anything else to say other than that. I did have another person that was really big in my life that I had just flashed on her, and that was my adopted Mom Feather. She was a 3/4 Cherokee and was heavily influenced me when I used to go back to the Sundance and learned a lot about Native culture and their medicine, which is much different than the medicine that I was doing at work. So there's more than one kind of medicine.
Well, thank you.